It's over, not admit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Censored. I'm joined by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
My name's leecamp. Thanks for being here. And we are going to get into, it's actually in the mainstream media that Zelensky's inner circle has admitted or admits or admit. It's a group per person, so it's a group of people.
A group,
but
it's
they,
one
but they,
singular group. So therefore, that
they
group
admits there is such a thing as a collective noun, so it could be a group.
But
The media admit.
Yes, but I think that's bullshit. I don't actually subscribe to that nonsensical. It is the media admits because it's the media.
Now that we've lost everyone who was thinking of tuning in, thank you for being here. And but yes, this is in the mainstream media. This is in Time magazine. We're going to cover how Zelensky's inner circle, speaking, I assume, behind his back, are admitting that the war is over. There is nothing that's going to change. So basically, it's just how many people do you want to die, which is what many of us have been saying for a year and a half now.
But do you think Zelensky knows and he's just continuing because he enjoys being the puppet of the United States and is afraid that the United States will assassinate him if he stops?
We will get to all that.
Okay.
So I want you to say that exact same thing in about 3 minutes.
Okay. I'll try to remember.
No, you have to get every word exactly the same. But on top of that, we will also be covering updates of the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict, to phrase it the way that the mainstream media would, or if you're a fan of truth, the genocide they're perpetrating on Palestine. So we're going to get to all that. I have a bunch of stories, a bunch of aspects of that we need to get to. Please take a moment to hit subscribe, hit share, all that good stuff. If you are already subscribed on Rumble or YouTube, hit the bell icon. And hello to everyone saying hello. And in fact, hello to everybody who hasn't said hello. Even if you haven't left a comment saying hello, still hello. Okay? But here's the Time magazine article. And I want to stress how mainstream this is. This is not just a rando Time magazine article. This is a cover article about Zelensky written by the guy who also wrote the article when he became Times Man of the Year or was nominated or whatever he was. I think he was Times Man of the Year, wasn't he? So
I don't know. Hitler was once.
True. But this is a fanboy of Zelensky who wrote this article. And the reason it's important that this is mainstream media is because, you know, where was this? Responsible Statecraft wrote a good analysis, which is what I'm going to get some of the points from. And they say, could this be the Walter Cronkite moment? Many of you may remember or may know. I don't remember it. I wasn't alive, but I know. I've seen the clips that the moment that the United States really lost Vietnam, really decided we were leaving, we were out, was when Walter Cronkite, really the face of U.S. propaganda on television. And back then there were 3 channels, so you had to watch them. Came home from a fact-finding mission. I think they were a fact-finding report the first time he'd, I think, gone to Vietnam. And he said, I don't see any way we can win this. The best we can do is leave with dignity or whatever he said, you know. So it's got a little bullshit in there. But
I think that also demands that you are someone with like a modicum of integrity, because I feel like there are a lot, like what was it in court? Rachel Maddow's lawyers said that, like, well, she doesn't expect people to think that she's telling the truth. So
Maddow, Alex Jones, and Tucker Carlson have all had their lawyers in court at some time say, look, he or she's not responsible because no one believes what they're saying.
Right. And so it's like, you actually just have to have a modicum of integrity to go on one of these fact-finding missions and come back and be like, yeah,
change your mind.
It's a cesspool. Like, we're never going to, but like, I feel like if they would have said Maddow, she'd come back and be like, absolutely. Let's keep it going.
I feel like she would have said, absolutely. I feel like that's what she would have said. She probably would have continued to promote the killing and the massacres, etc. Okay, so that's the Time magazine article, but I want to read some of the analysis from Responsible Statecraft, and just very quickly to give you the key points of this Time magazine article, which, if you read the whole article, actually sounds pretty fawning of Zelensky. It's like, oh, he's still fighting, he's still trying, but
the headline itself is just very like.
Right, but
Rudy-esque.
Rudy, he's the Rudy of You notice Rudy played in one play or whatever, or 3 plays or something, and it was in a game that was already over. So yeah, he is
But
the Rudy.
he believed
He
in his
believes.
ability to play football, Lee.
That's what
Okay? That's all that
Zelensky.
matters.
Zelensky's also the size of Rudy. I don't know if that matters, but okay. So, but within that article that is largely fawning of Zelensky, it describes Zelensky as delusional for his failure to accept battlefield realities and his unwillingness to consider peace negotiations. Most remarkably, the sources are Zelensky's own aides and advisors. The Zelensky aides said, here are the key points. 1, Ukraine's war aims are unrealistic. Kiev has long maintained that it will retake all Ukrainian territory, including Crimea, after a disastrous summer counteroffensive that we were all told on our mainstream media was going great. Zelensky's advisors have given up on this, on the idea that they're retaking this land. But not Zelensky, apparently, who's delusional, bordering on messianic. One of Zelensky's closest aides says, we're out of options. We're not winning, but try telling him that. Do you want to now repeat what you said, why he might be doing that? Could it be that he's afraid he will be lynched if if you lose a war and then you leave the presidency, things do not go well for you.
Well, but also like he's there to be the puppet of the United States and the United States' proxy war with Russia, and his whole entire being rests on this. So to give up would be basically to be walking into, Uncle Sam and being like, I couldn't do it, and then seeing what the U.S. government does with you, because they're so benevolent and usually treat people who don't do what they're told in terms of proxy wars. They usually treat them really well.
Yeah, when they turn on former allies, the U.S. or the ally turns on the U.S. and so the U.S. is then opposed to them, it generally goes well. Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, it generally goes great for them when that happens. Both of them doing fine. They both live in Miami.
It's probably where they would be had everything gone to plan. I mean,
So to continue from just a few more points. Number 2, that's sunken within this Time magazine article. There have been staggering casualties that have decimated the Ukrainian army. Ukraine has refused to disclose them, but there have been hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian casualties. According to the article, the average age of currently serving Ukrainian soldiers is 43. And getting older every day because the youth has already been sacrificed. 43. And here's the thing. I'd like to pretend that's not that old because it may or may not be my age. However, it's ancient for soldiers. When a nation sends their cannon fodder in, it's like 18 to 20-year-olds. 43 is ancient, and they've already sacrificed all their young. It's so horrifying. And I just want to say my enthusiasm or excitement right now is not, oh, yay, Ukraine's losing. Oh, yay, people are dying. No. It is excitement at the truth, which you and I and many others have been reporting for a year and a half, finally getting into the mainstream, even getting into Zelensky's inner circle. And
potentially, therefore, ending the war so that more people don't have to die. It is interesting because I remember when my mom got her U.S. citizenship, she was like 50 something, I think. And they in order to keep her Swedish citizenship as well, she had to promise that if the U.S. needed her, that she would fight for them. And she was like, if y'all have to come knock on my door, y'all have already lost whatever war it was that you were.
She's in her 70s. She's got 2 bad knees.
Well, this was when she was in her 50s, but still, it's a 50-year-old pacifist.
And her number 1 skill is gardening. So I think it would be rough.
But it's them. So we're looking at not that Ukrainian soldiers are better at gardening than being soldiers, but this is, in terms of soldiers, nobody looks to the 40 and 50-year-olds first, is my point.
Right.
And it is absolutely disgusting and despicable that there aren't people who are younger, not because they should be cannon fodder, but because they already have been. And this is exactly what, I can't remember who it was who said that the U.S. was willing to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. This is exactly what is happening here. the fact that Ukrainian youth have basically been shoved into the line of cannons for the sake of U.S. empire is absolutely grotesque.
Yeah. And like you said, the reason I'm enthusiastic for this article is I hope that this is breaking through and can finally end this shit show that has been going on for a year and a half. And we all knew it was going to go this way. And sure enough, it's gone this way. Just to continue real quick, point number 3, sunken within the Time magazine article, morale is collapsing. Within the officer ranks, there's growing dissension bordering on mutiny. Some of them are refusing direct orders. Number 4, and final point, corruption is uncontrollable. It has long been taboo in Western media to suggest that Ukraine's government is filled with corruption, yet a top presidential advisor admitted as much once his audio recorder had been shut off. He said, quote, people are stealing like there's no tomorrow. And this can be the other reason that Zelensky does not want this thing to end, is he and his people have, according to Seymour Hersh and his sources, stolen $400 million. And that was several months ago. Skimmed off the top, $400 million. So much money that the CIA, which is used to a certain amount of skimming going on, actually had a meeting with them where they basically said, it's too much. You're taking too much.
Wow,
like,
the CIA has to tell you that. That's really bad.
Yeah. But so,
well, and let's not forget that he quote unquote rang the bell at the opening of the New York Stock Exchange via Zoom, basically saying that Ukraine is open for business. So please come.
No, he said that.
No, I know.
Not basically.
Well, okay, he said that basically to say, like, right, come all ye corporations. And I mean, we've seen that already just in terms of like the breaking down of unions, you know, the complete falling apart of any kind of semblance of workers' rights and things like that. I mean, and a lot of this you'd expect to see when there's a war raging, but there has been a very concerted effort, a bit like, you know, the shock doctrine that Naomi Klein wrote about in her book, the idea that when there is a disaster like this, it creates a perfect stage for corporations to come in and completely decimate any kind of safety net and any kind of actual you know, socialized form of government. And so that's happening at the same time. And yeah, I mean, Zelensky has made bank off of this. Like, didn't his parents buy like a mansion in Israel or something?
Well, I know he has multiple mansions. I once covered, he has multiple very expensive condos in places like Spain and other areas.
I thought he like also bought his parents like an $8 million house in, you know, occupied Palestine or some shit.
I didn't know that. That very well could be true. But so this, I just as a final concluding point, this is what we said would happen. This is, the U.S. gets, to a certain degree, yes, we didn't get everything that the U.S. government wanted, but a lot of what they wanted from this proxy war. They never cared about Ukrainian civilians, Ukrainian citizens, not for a second. They just viewed them as cannon fodder in this Cold War, although bordering on hot war with Russia. And the goal was to split Russia from the international community. They succeeded with Europe. They did not succeed with China. It was to harm Russia economically, which largely it has not succeeded with. And it has facilitated, this is the you know, collateral damage. It has facilitated the economic rift, the dwindling of the global hegemonic power, the U.S. hegemonic power, because Russia and China and so many other countries have said, holy God, we need to speed up BRICS. We need to speed up creating an economy outside of the U.S. because the U.S. is unhinged. But no one ever thought Ukraine was going to win this unless you were watching CNN and you believed everything they were saying. This was going to end at a peace table, and it should have ended at a peace table a year and a half ago.
Well, and here's the other thing is that when people talk about like, oh, you can't sit down at the table with someone like Putin, how do you think that wars end? There's one of two ways that wars end. One, everyone dies on one side.
Yep.
Two, there's a peace table. Those are literally the only ways that wars end. So if you're saying you can't sit down at the table, you are literally saying, I support the basically killing to the last Ukrainian so that we can say to Russia. It's like, really, that's your stance?
Right.
What an awful, horrific person you must be to have that perspective. Like, this is really the only path forward. And of course, you've talked about this, and so have I, how the United States and the UK ensured that Zelensky and Putin would not sit down at a peace table even just a couple of months after the invasion started. So it's really...
So, moving on, although I have a segue here, did you know that the number of civilian casualties during the war in Ukraine so far is estimated by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights? Actually, remember that office. It will come up later in our discussion. Verified a total of 9,614 civilian deaths.
How can they be that specific?
Well,
like the 14. Are you sure about the 14?
That's their specific.
Like, not 13. It's not 15. It's like, okay.
They know. They know. 9,614 civilian deaths during Russia's invasion of Ukraine as of, this is September of 2023. Okay? 9,614.
Okay.
Number. You're like, just ease off it a bit.
Sorry I asked about the specificity of the number. God.
That wasn't why I was being adamant. But so that's how many have died, civilians killed in Ukraine. Okay. Number of civilians killed in Gaza just in 3.5 weeks of this insanity, over 9,000. So basically, and it very well may be 9,500 by now. But so basically the same number have died in Ukraine, been killed in Ukraine during the U.S. proxy war, as have been murdered in Gaza. 3 weeks versus a year and a half.
Well, this is what happens when you bomb people who can't leave one of the most tightly, most densely packed areas. I mean, it's yeah. Sorry, that wasn't very eloquent. I'm struggling to find words today because I'm tired. But you know what I mean? It's like, so many people live so closely together in Gaza and they can't leave.
But it's also
they're not allowed to leave. So when you bomb an area,
Yeah.
carpet bomb that area, of course you're going to have mass casualties, which has been the point, compared to people if they lived in, you know, the regular way that people live, more spread out and things like that. Then you will necessarily have fewer. Also, Russia is not carpet bombed, as far as I know.
No, that it also speaks to the fact that Russia actually has gone after targets. That doesn't mean they never hit civilians. I've never said that they don't, but they are and have been going after military targets. They could have decided they were just going to carpet bomb Ukraine,
Right.
but they chose not to, because what would be the point of that other than just being insane? But Israel has decided that their plan is just to kill, as it seems, as many people as possible so that everybody in Gaza flees south, where they can't escape for the most part, although Israel has been trying to make it so that Egypt will set up tent cities for that. I mean, it's just, it's full on ethnic cleansing. But so that brings us to our next topic, which is the fact that the U.S. is actually there and actually helping Israel with these war crimes. Now, pretty much everybody watching this knows the U.S. Props up Israel, sends them billions, sends them munitions and all kinds of weapons, and many of the bombs being dropped are from the U.S. But this is the kind of next level where the U.S. is actually acting as part of their military in some regards. First of all, you have the Pentagon confirming that the U.S. is flying drones over Gaza to aid Israel. So how is it not part of their military if you're giving them the bombs to drop and flying drones over in order to give them intelligence to commit their genocide? That basically is the U.S. and Israel are committing genocide on Gaza. It's not just Israel.
Well, this is a long-standing relationship. You know, the everything from something less deadly, like tear gas canisters that the IDF uses against Palestinians. Those are U.S. tear gas canisters. So everything from that to much more heavy artillery. No, that's correct. Artillery. Jesus, wow.
You got it.
Is has been supplied by the US for a long time. And I think it's important that we talk about this in terms of like the longevity of this context, so that yes, the shit that went down on October 7th has created a space where this is pretty much all we've been talking about. But we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that like, oh, shit got really bad just recently. It's like, no, shit has been really bad since 1948. That's right, 1948.
Right. Check watch.
Right. So basically it's important to have that context about what we're talking about.
Keep talking.
And the US, not complicity, because complicity makes it sound more passive. The US's assistance in the ongoing ethnic cleansing that started in the 40s. So
yeah, it has been going on since 1948. However, this is an aggressive speeding up of the murderous process. So you have U.S. sending munitions. We know that, billions of dollars worth. You have U.S. operating drones above Gaza to feed information to Israel. But it gets even worse. U.S. Special Forces are assisting Israel in Gaza. U.S. officials confirmed U.S. Special Forces are seeking to rescue U.S. citizens held captive by Hamas. So this is also confirmed by the New York Times. Palestinian sources report their involvement in Israel's ground invasion of Gaza as well. The U.S. has sent special forces to Israel. Quote from the New York Times, we're actively helping the Israelis to do a number of things. Well, that's from the Assistant Secretary of Defense. Mayer, who is the Pentagon's senior special operations policy official, said they are there to identify hostages, including American hostages. And Mayer says the U.S. commandos have not been given any combat roles, but we're discussing with Israeli forces the situation in Gaza for what is going to be a very complex fight going forward.
Go with complex again.
Yeah, just say it's complex. You know, that's Hannibal
understand.
Lecter often said what he was doing was complex. Yeah, it's so Palestinian reports are that U.S. special forces are involved in the ground war, but the U.S. has confirmed, officials at the Pentagon have confirmed that U.S. special forces are there in Israel doing something. What do you think they're doing? Do you think they're playing baccarat, or they're just hanging out, hanging at the Tel Aviv nightclubs, or so? This seems to show on multiple fronts that this is not just Israel committing this genocide. This is the U.S. and Israel committing this genocide, killing more people, innocent people in Gaza in 3 weeks than have been killed in Ukraine in a year and a half proxy war. I mean, these numbers are pretty unbelievable. They've also dropped more explosive tonnage on Gaza than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Well, and actually the oh man, I had it. Oh, the New York Times even reported about the fact that Israeli officials had said that they took a page out of the playbook from the US's bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in terms of how they're dealing with Gaza.
In terms of whether it should be allowed, meaning
whether it should be allowed, but also just like, yeah, you ended there was nothing to do after. There was nothing you can say or do after that. So they are looking to that as a role model in terms of how they deal with Gaza. So, and even the New York Times said that. So, or printed that, that information. So,
which for those of you who maybe haven't, studied the history of the dropping of the atomic bombs and just kind of have a vague knowledge of, the U.S. did that to end World War II. World War II was over. Japan had already given signals that they were willing to surrender. Germany had already surrendered. And the U.S. just wanted to try out their bombs on humans and see how it would go. They also very much wanted to do it even though they were a so-called ally, the U.S. was very much afraid of the communist revolution in Russia, and they wanted to drop them as a sign to the Soviet Union that we have this immense power. And so they dropped it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In Hiroshima, they killed something like a few thousand troops while 100,000 people died. In Nagasaki, it was like 200 or something, like a tiny, tiny number of actual troops died while 100,000 people were killed.
Yeah, so
unbelievable.
So basically, the Israeli officials said that the mass civilian casualties, which makes it sound like they died of polio, the murder of civilians in Gaza, the mass murder of civilians,
of polio.
Well, it's like casualties. Well, what they die of, were, quote, an acceptable price in its campaign against Hamas, and they cited the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the U.S. to justify its bombings in Gaza. So,
and they continue. I'm not bringing all the details because you can get those elsewhere, but they continue to bomb hospitals. They continue to bomb refugee camps. They bombed Jabalia, is that right? A refugee camp a second time after it was so
like
horrific.
3 times.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to bring a clip in a bit of Wolf Blitzer, believe it or not, even talking about that. But while we're talking about the U.S. involvement over in Israel, this has come out, which is truly horrifying and says a lot about U.S. plans. I mean, I feel like this says everything about the U.S. plans here. The fact that Biden wants the arms deals with Israel to be done in complete secrecy, which has never been done because Congress is supposedly supposed to have say over these type of things. They have the purse strings of war.
Right. And now one could make the argument, well, Congress just says yes anyway. And it's like, that might be true. But the idea that we are setting a precedent here where the president or the president's administration can just do this without ever even consulting Congress, that is a dangerous and scary precedent to make.
Yeah, very. I mean, it's the fascism handbook of like, right. We have no responsibility for you to know anything about what we do.
It speaks to the understanding that they know that this is fakaked. They know that this is not okay and not good, and it's just it is the unmasked backing of genocide. It speaks to that knowledge, because why would you hide something if you knew it to be good, if you knew it to be just? You don't. You're like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the good thing. But because you know you're not, because you know this is so morally fakaked, and you know that so many of your people in the United States are against it, then you have to somehow create a space where you can do this on the DL.
Yeah. Which is hilarious that they need to make it even more covered up, because most of what the Pentagon does is already covered up. I mean, we don't know where the $1 trillion a year really goes. During each of their 5 audits, the Pentagon has just come out after a year of auditing themselves and said, we failed. We don't know where the money goes. In their last failed audit, they said they can't account for 55% of their assets. So there's so much of it is already done in secrecy. There are black secrecy. There are black budgets, which the people can't see as well. The CIA, the secret torture camps. There's so much in secrecy, and yet they need more. They need to cover it up more. And by the way, a former State Department official, Josh Paul, said, "I've never seen anything like it." In a highly unusual move, the White House has requested for it to be able to conduct arms deals with Israel in complete secrecy in a time when the U.S. is supporting a military that experts say has been committing war crimes in Gaza and beyond. The White House made the request within a $106 billion supplemental defense funding. $100 billion. This is unbelievable amounts of money. As reported by Women for Weapons Trade Transparency, in these times, the White House is asking for up to $3.5 billion in military funding for Israel. But if all of it becomes secret, you wouldn't even know that.
Right.
I mean, to me, this is a giant red flag that, like, oh, the U.S. is going to be very involved in this ongoing genocide in Gaza, and they don't want people. What little we do know, they want us to know less. I mean, And this is the Democrats, because these are the good guys, right? These are the ones with transparency that always tell us
Right.
what's going on in government. And it's because it was Trump, right? That was very secretive, and he cut off press briefings, and so he's the bad guy. And Democrats are all good with transparency, right?
Yeah, it was Obama that hit more people with espionage charges than any other collection of presidents before him. So yeah, transparency.
But there is some good news, and if I know you, Eleanor, you're going to get excited about this. Blinken, is this it? He ran to Israel. He was just in Israel, and he pushed for humanitarian relief, but they didn't promise him anything.
Wait, what?
He went to Israel,
Okay.
and he said, "We need humanitarian pauses."
What is that? What does that mean? What is a humanitarian pause? Is that like everybody gets lunch? Like, what does that mean?
So what it is so the thing about it. So what happens? So people. It means nothing, and they wouldn't even give him that. They wouldn't even give him the nothing that he was asking for. He asked for humanitarian pauses because here's the thing: is behind closed doors, the U.S. doesn't give a shit about humanitarian pauses.
No,
they don't care.
No, because of course, if you did, then you'd demand a ceasefire. Which I feel like humanitarian pause, like, humanitarian pause feels like it's like you can't say ceasefire because that's too clear cut. So I'm going to say humanitarian pause, which is vague enough to mean nothing, but strong enough so that Democrats can say, I'm a humanitarian. Like, there are people who stay up all night trying to come up with this language. And the Democrats are really, really good at it. They are so good at it. They are so good at the euphemisms for shit. They are excellent. And this is one of those examples, a humanitarian pause. Go suck it. Like, it's just, what the? That doesn't mean anything, but it's a way for them to stand up and be like, I asked for humanitarian pause. And
he couldn't even get that. He couldn't even get their bullshit that they made up. Basically, a humanitarian pause, I suppose what it would mean is we're not going to bomb hospitals and like ambulances as they try to, literally they bombed a medical convoy.
Well, the Red Cross had told them where they were going to be in the hopes that they would just like not bomb that specific place. And what do? They bomb that specific place.
Right. So it almost makes more sense for the Red Cross not to alert them.
I know. I agree. But
yeah, it's a true horror show, but it also goes to show how little the U.S. is doing, how little they can do. I mean, he can't even get that from Israel. Israel's like, yeah, we don't care.
Well, and here's the thing. It's like if the U.S. really cared,
they would have gotten it. They
would have gotten it because, as you just showed,
yeah,
Israel owes their existence, you could say, but their perpetuation of this genocide, they owe that to the U.S. So if the U.S. said jump legit, then Israel would have to say how high. I mean, it's that kind of relationship. But because the U.S. doesn't care, and they just want to be able to check a box, like I asked and they said no, but I tried. It's like walking up to a police department and be like, hi, excuse me, I was wondering if you could stop murdering Black people for me. Would that
just for a pause, just for a weekend, pause. For like a weekend?
And then of course the police was like, no, let's go F yourself. And it's like,
right.
It's like you're not.
You asked for the least you could possibly do. Just don't kill innocent people for like 2 days. And they're like, no, we're not promising you that. But so literally, this is good news. I know I was kidding the last time, but I think we are seeing a lot of the narrative just breaking down. I've covered this some before in previous live streams. The narrative's breaking down. There are people that not just a massive protest. I've shown you video in previous live streams of these hundreds of thousands. I'm going to talk more about the one coming up tomorrow in DC. But just massive protests around the world. 66% of the American people want a ceasefire, even though 0 in the Senate vote for it, which includes Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul and any of the others you thought might be the rogue people. They all voted for it and not voted for the ceasefire, voted against the ceasefire. But here's how the narrative is again breaking down. Some of these people are quitting. So this is Tara Reid posted this, and others have been posting as well. But she says it's telling when after 30 years, the UN director of the New York office of the he's the High Commissioner for Human Rights has resigned due to the genocide by Israel of Palestinians as the world watches and the U.S. helps. And I just want to read a little paragraph of this. Sorry, the writing's small, but he says, "Dear High Commissioner, this will be my last official communication to you as the director of the New York Office Human Rights." And then he talks about how horrific it is. And at the bottom paragraph, he says, "This is a textbook case of genocide. The European ethno-nationalist settler colonial project in Palestine has entered into its final phase towards the expediting destruction of the last remnants of indigenous Palestinian life in Palestine. What's more, the governments of the US, the UK, and much of Europe are wholly complicit in this horrific assault. Not only are these governments refusing to meet their treaty obligations to ensure respect for the Geneva Conventions, but they are in fact actively arming the assault, providing economic and intelligence support, and giving political and diplomatic cover for Israel's atrocities." That's from Volker Turk, High Commissioner for Human Rights. And he has Police Wilson, Geneva? Palais Wilson, Geneva. And you don't have to laugh as well. You could just correct and leave it at that. Just leave it at the correction. And he's quitting because I'm sure he obviously raised all these alarms and got nothing back. And the reason he's resigning is because if you stay there, you're basically complicit and signing off on it. Like, the resignation was his only tool left, I'm sure, to make a point as to we are witnessing genocide and we are standing here and acting like it's not.
Right. And you see this with military that resigns, like military that resigns. Like I spoke with Matthew Ho, who was a Marine Corps captain and also had worked at the Pentagon, the State Department, and he had a resignation letter where he basically said why he was resigning and that these wars were wrong and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these resignation letters are oftentimes a way for people not just to share with their higher commands or what have you, their feelings about this, but to also then make that public, to make it public so that people understand there are people inside the system that are leaving because of this, and the system itself is perpetuating this, so that people understand. I think a lot of times, like if you read Obama's book, he was like, he'll be like, well, I didn't want to drop all these bombs, but I kind of had to, because like just the inertia of the system. It's like, that's bullshit, dude. So I think a lot of times people have this perspective that like, oh, it's not actually people that are pushing this. It absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
And so these resignation letters also give us that window into places that we think should be standing up to these atrocities. And he actually mentions in the letter other genocides.
Oh, sorry, I pulled it down.
But I was just skimming it while you were reading. But it was a really interesting point that he made, that the Palestinians were not the only people that they had failed in his time working with the UN. And I think that that's really important to highlight, that like we think, oh, well, what did the UN say? It's like, who gives a shit? Because they're not stopping genocide. Not even, I mean, obviously they don't have the capacity to go up against the United States military, but it's like, they're not even standing up against it in ways that they can, So
No.
I think that, I'm glad that people are reposting that.
Okay, so right now I'm going to show you some awesome protest arts that was projected onto the buildings in Washington yesterday. We're also in a minute going to show you the Wolf Blitzer clip of,
which we wouldn't usually do.
No, we would normally, but Wolf Blitzer actually slightly grilling the IDF on their continued bombing aggressively of innocent men, women, and children, and And the fact that it's coming even from CNN, anyway, I'll get into that in a second. That's all going to be rumble.com/leecamp. That's rumble.com/leecamp. It's free to watch there. Also, this will continue at my locals page, but rumble.com/leecamp. So I hope you will join me over there. Join us over there because I have to build up that page because YouTube bans and deletes and censors and everything. So rumble.com/leecamp. I also want to thank, why is this not scrolling? Eamon for this amazing donation. Really kind of you. When the world is shocked at these acts of crime, the people of power do. From their end, they're thinking they'll go as far as we let them go until we hold them accountable. I'm glad there's channels like yours doing your part. Thank you so much, Eamon. Okay, so rumble.com/leecamp. But while I do that and cut off the other streams, will you start talking about the art that was projected yesterday?
Sure. So basically there's a march happening this weekend in Washington, D.C. You may have heard tell of it because there's a lot of posts about it happening online. Saturday, November 4th, there's a march at 2 p.m.
I will pull that up right now. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to have to do extra.
No. I just.
So ahead of that, there's been some planning actions and the like.